Tyler, we all watched the video, most of us on our phones, of a bunch of animals running into a church service in St. Paul where people were just trying to worship God and disrupting it and making just a complete loud nuisance of themselves. And this stuff isn't organic, is it? I know you wrote the book, The Woke-to-Puss. I scream this from the hilltops, that all this stuff is paid and organized.
Well, I think it's important to mention two things. Andy Ngo had a very good complaint recently where he said everyone says, oh, this is paid, this is organized, this isn't real. And I think that last part is where everything falls apart. Much of this is paid, much of it is organized, but that doesn't mean this isn't real. I mean, we saw people like, Renee Good, and by the way, I consider her death to be a tragedy. But at the same time, we had someone here who was engaged in this ICE watch agitation where they would follow these law enforcement officials and try to prevent them from carrying out their duty to enforce the law. And so she was in her car. They gave her maybe conflicting orders, but we can see clearly from the videos that she made contact with this ICE officer before he opened fire and shot her. And I hate to see anyone lose their life, but if you're in a situation as an ICE officer where it seems like she's about to run you over, it makes sense that you're going to fire in what seems to be self-defense. And, we've seen the left seize on this and say over and over again that this was a murder, when in reality you look at the situation and I'm saying this is self-defense. So now we have this horrific invasion of a church. I mean, talk about an eye-opening moment where I would expect the left, if they had an ounce of, real sanity in that little bit of moderateness that, Tim Walz and that Virginia's new governor, Abigail Spanberger, claim to have, they should be condemning this from the rooftops. But that's not what we're seeing. What we saw, I got a very weak sauce response. Thankfully, Tim Walz said he doesn't support this, but he isn't out there full-throatedly condemning it the way he should. I mean, these people were worshiping God, and you had suddenly anti-ICE agitators rushing in, dividing the sanctuary, separating the people off from the pastor, and then surrounding some members of the congregation. And you see these kids who are sitting there terrified, needing to be comforted by their parents, while agitators are shouting, "Justice for Renee Good." And I think the one that really opened my eyes was they said, "Who shut this down? We shut this down." That is the message that I think America needs to hear here, because you had agitators who came in there and shut down a church service in the name of pursuing their opposition to the enforcement of immigration law. And if this isn't so far off the reservation that it should wake Americans up, I don't know what is. Now, I looked into the organizations that were behind that particular event, and it looks like they don't have very strong ties. One of the ringleaders used to be at the NAACP in Minneapolis, and I think that raises some questions. But her organization, the Racial Justice Network, does not receive funds from the left's dark money network, and which kind of surprised me. You have in Minnesota various left-wing groups that are agitating, that are, inspiring protest and then inspiring worse in Minnesota about opposing ICE. And I'm really seeing at least 3 different sets of activist groups. You have the Neville Roy Singham network groups like the Party for Socialism and Liberation, and a few other groups that are allied with him, like Democratic Socialists of America. And then you have the Indivisible Network, Indivisible Twin Cities, that is also organizing actions there. But then you have the Racial Justice Network, which, and this is the thing that I think Americans need to understand. I talk a lot, and you rightly talk a lot, about the left's networks funding these people, but there are many of them on the ground who are so radicalized that this is a local effort. And there are a lot of people who really believe and are willing. The reason I brought up Renee Good was because this is an American mom who got radicalized, who was following ICE, who was endangering her life and others, arguably, by engaging in the act she was engaging in. And she ended up losing her life. And this is what these people are willing to do.